Hello again. I am here with my January wrap-up of the books I've read in January. And these are the books I've read for the month of January. And didn't fall. Alrighty, so let me get into these books. Okay, the first one, Gathering of Shadows. This is the second in the series, the Darker Shade of Magic series by V.E. Schwab. I give this a 4 stars. I really liked it. I did hear some people complain about, I guess, that there's no real story in this, and I would say it is definitely a character development book. It is a setup book for the third book, but I still loved it because I loved the character development in this. I loved the character development of Lila Bard. I loved the character development of Kel and his brother, Rydell, how you say his name? I enjoyed this book. I really did enjoy this book. It's got me really hyped to read the third book, and so far I've been reading the third book, and it's pretty good. But this book, 4 stars. I enjoyed it. Okay. Next book I already covered, which is Batman Nightwalker. I read this book. I believe I gave it 4 stars. It is kind of a Batman Silence of the Lambs type of story, because it's Bruce Wayne kind of interviewing this prisoner, and there's a whole lot of psychological stuff going on. And yeah, it's really a really good book. I enjoyed it. Not as much as I liked Warcross, but I still thought it was a pretty good book. Third book. Again, I also covered this one. Gunslinger Girl by Lindsay Eley. I really like this book. This is a 4-star book. I would say it is... The nicest thing I like about this book is kind of like the double dealings and the way the characters kind of almost Game of Thrones type kind of like work for their own ends. It reminds me a little bit of Caraval, and as far as like you don't really know like the motives and stuff behind these people until near the end of the book. And it's quite a good book. I really enjoyed it. You could look up my review for it, but Gunslinger Girl, that was my third one here. Let's see. Fourth one I didn't cover, which was The Acolyte by Nick Cutter. This is me doing my Nick Cutter reads through all the Nick Cutter books. This book, I can see here, let's see, Jonah Murtagh is an acolyte on the New Bethlehem police force. His job, eradicate all heretical religious faiths, their practitioners, and artifacts. Murtagh's got problems. One of his partners is a zealot, and he's in love with the other one. Trouble at work, trouble at home. Murtagh realizes that you can rob a citizenry of almost anything, but you can't take away its faith. When a string of bombings paralyzed the city's religious fanatics are initially suspected, but startling clues point to a far more ominous perpetrator. If Murtagh doesn't get things sorted out, the Divine Council will dispatch the Quints, Heaven's own bagmen. The clock is ticking towards doomsday by the chosen... Oh, clock is clicking towards doomsday for the chosen of New Bethlehem. And Jonah Murtagh's got another problem. The biggest and most worrisome, Jonah isn't a believer. This book has a lot of trigger warnings. I will just put this out there right away. For animal abuse, for religious persecution, Islamophobia. There is just... It's the first, like, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 pages are really tough to read. Because of some of the stuff in there. And it was interesting. It was definitely interesting because it's about basically a religious society, kind of a Christian religious society that persecutes other religions. So you have persecuting Muslims, persecuting Scientologists, persecuting Mormons, persecuting just pretty much anybody. And the horrible police corruption is in this, really bad. And it started off good. I actually did enjoy it when I first started reading it, even though it was very tough to read in the beginning. But it kind of started to fall flat near the middle of the book, and after all like the horrific scenes you saw and all the horrific violence, it just kind of I don't know, kind of meandered along a little bit, and sadly, I would only give this like a 3-star. But like I said, this is a book where there's a lot of trigger warnings. Like, you know, if you're a devout Christian, you might have trouble with this book as well. But that's my review of The Acolyte by Nick Cutter. Next book, These Shallow Graves by Jennifer Donnelly. This took place, I think, in 1890, about a woman whose father passed away, and then, you know, she basically, you know, it was a presumed suicide. She investigates it. It's basically a mystery set in the late 1800s, you know, turn of the century, and it's set in New York, and it's got a really cool map of New York here. But this book also, I felt like it kind of fell flat for me. This is like the Gilded Age is like my favorite time of like historical fiction that I've read, or actually nonfiction that I've read, because of the whole industrialism and a lot of stuff was going on during that time. And I really thought this book would be right up my alley. And honestly, this book was almost hard to get through. I'll give it a 3-star because it did have some interesting twists and turns, but really it was just kind of dull for me, to be honest with you. And it saddened me because I honestly expected a lot more out of the book. So that was These Shallow Graves. Next one I've already talked about, which is Stranger Things. Oh, Stranger Things. Stranger Things. Strange Weather. I got strange things on my Strange Weather by Joe Hill, which is 4 short novels. I've already reviewed this. I love this book. This is, if you're a fan of Stephen King or Joe Hill, you should definitely pick this up. These are 4 pretty good. I mean, 2 of them were for 5-star novels, and the other ones were like at least 4-star books. This is a really good book to pick up. Joe Hill, Strange Weather, but you can look at my review and I'll talk about it. And of course, another review that I didn't like, which hopefully this will be the last time I talk about this book, will be Between Two Fires. I talked about this on my Chris Buhlman author spotlight. Not a fan of this book at all. Didn't like the characterization, the way that they characterize women in this. As far as the treatment of women in this book, I didn't really like the story. I thought it was just lumbering along, and yeah, not a good book for me. So this one, The Wilderness Within, was another book I read this month. Very short book. This one, while visiting fellow writer Frank Harlan Marshall, Derek Gray senses a palpable dread within Frank's house and the forest that surrounds it, a subtle malignant sentience. What should be a joyous event as they await the surprise arrival of a long-lost friend, comedian Dizzy Izzy Haberstein, is fraught with unease. Derek does not understand. Derek's confusion is upended by the chance meeting with musician Althea, formerly of Dark Angel Asylum, a band that dropped out of sight once the leader, Alistair Blunt, ended up in an insane asylum. As their relationship blossoms, Derek's disorientation at the hands of Forrest manifests as his world turns sideways, and one of Frank's fictional creations, a murderous monster named Average Joe, gains foothold in a surreal psychological terrain. As the worlds of reality and fantasy meld, what transpires bound a deeply profound to pure madness. I like this book. It is a bit weirdly confusing in some spots, because it is kind of a surrealism kind of book. It definitely goes off the rails, more like a Cronenberg almost kind of style, the way it goes, just into weird areas, as far as what reality is and how reality is bent and shaped. This cover is significant to a part of the book, which I won't spoil. But yeah, I'll give this a 4-star. I think this is a good book, but it's definitely a weird book. But I did enjoy it. I did enjoy the way, you know, reality slowly bent, and the way this book kind of just moved along into weird places you didn't expect. So that is The Wilderness Within by John Claude Smith. Again, another book that I've covered, which I think you'll see I've covered a lot, was To Serve with Love. I did talk about the problems I had with this book, about the author and some of his, what I believe was sexism kind of quotes in this book, but as far as his story, for history, and for the, you know, I read this on Martin Luther King Day, or the weekend of Martin Luther King. It was an interesting, definitely interesting book to read, and it actually sparked my interest to read more for Black History Month, and sparked my TBR for Black History Month. So that is that book. Next book that I read, Six of Crows. I finally finished reading this book, and while I liked it, it wasn't as good, I guess, as maybe the hype. Maybe the hype was a little too much for me. I did enjoy the character. I did enjoy the story. But it was good, but not great. I don't know if I would give it a 4-star. Maybe a 3.5 or 3.75. That just, for me anyway. I like the characters. I like the whole concept of basically these people trying to pull off this robbery kind of thing, and this whole like heist book. Really, that's what this is. This is a heist story between these characters. I like the interaction with the characters. I like the story. It just didn't seem to grip me as much as I thought it would, and it just kind of felt a little bit flatter to me. I will be reading Crooked Kingdom soon, so hopefully I may enjoy that better. Not that I hated this book. I did really like it, but not really a 4-star read for me. So that was Six of Crows. And of course, the last one I just covered in my last video, if you can still see my face after this, is the Stephen King 11/22/63. I said this is a really good book. It's a 5-star read. It definitely has, if you've read it, you should definitely read this next after you've read it. If you haven't read this, or before you read this, you might want to read it, because there is a chunk of the book that covers Derry and kind of like alludes to what happened in that book. So it's a nice companion book to it, but plus it's its own good time travel story. And that is pretty much it. Oh, my camera. That is it for my January wrap up. That was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 books, a couple of real big ones in here. So thank you again for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.